Entering into part 2 of the trilogy with Dr. Tom Whalen. Today we're going to be talking about energy. Energy is so important. I mean, if you have energy, you can run off your belly fat. If you have enough energy, you can work without stopping and keep having brilliant ideas. Now, what's the problem with this? Most of us don't actually have the ability to unlock the energy reserves we have. You see this all the time. Someone is tired and they have fat stored on the body. That means that the problem isn't necessarily with supply, it's with distribution. Dr. Whalen's going to take us through aspects of quantum biology to discover how to find metabolic shortcuts to utilize the energy reserves you already have and apply them to life.
You know, energy is something that traditionally has not been well understood in Western medicine. The closest we typically have come to having some appreciation of it is the effects of the adrenocortical system, sending out stress hormones, boosting our energy levels for a while, and then having that post-stress response, burnout, drop in energy. But more recently, people have started looking at many of the activities in our bodies and our brains from the perspective of what's going on with energy. There's a couple of terms I would like to throw out. One is quantum biology.
Say what?
Woo, woo, woo. You heard it here.
Is that something that Deepak Chopra invented?
Heavens no.
Okay.
It's part of the foundations of the universe, where some of our traditional ways of looking at energy as, you know, a billiard ball bumps into another billiard ball and knocks it into the pocket, seems correct on the visible surface, but when we get down into the cellular level, other things are going on. And energy is most effectively understood by appreciating the quantum effects. And one of the things that goes hand in hand with quantum effects are enzymes.
I like enzymes.
Yeah. So if you imagine that you've got a boulder to push up over a hill, it takes a lot of energy to push that boulder all the way up to the top before it can roll down to the other side. But what can happen is that in our cells is there are these actual quantum pathways where molecules and ions can pass that bypass having to go up over that big energy gradient of the hill and allow us to pass almost by magic from one side to the other. And some of the things that help us to utilize those quantum passageways are enzymes. I'm really amazed at the way that herbs, the bacteria in our gut, utilize enzymes to produce energy that we can then use, energy that affects the way our body and our brains actually function.
By making the cells more efficient.
Exactly.
So you're actually able to utilize the energy that may already be available.
Exactly. When we're struggling on our own, when we're burned out, our enzymes have been depleted. And so every action requires us to push with all our might to get up over that high hill. That if we are able to take the time to pull back and restore those enzyme systems, those other axes in our bodies that are trying to give us energy, we can utilize those shortcuts.
Can I do this but just by going to GNC and getting some pancreatic enzymes? Is that going to restore me? He's laughing at me. This is my show. He's laughing at me.
Did you see me at GNC earlier today?
No.
Probably not. In some cases, people may hit on something that can be helpful, but usually the enzymes that are sold in that fashion are like clubs. And it's the kind of thing where not enough is bad for us, but too much is also bad for us.
Okay, so it's kind of barbaric approach is to just kind of wholesale eat all of the enzymes. My understanding of enzymes, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that they're kind of catalysts, so they don't possess energy, but they serve as, kind of mediaries in the body.
Yeah, their energy interacts with our cells to just change the pathways that the other molecules, the other small organelles in our cells can interface with each other and act very efficiently. If you take away the enzymes that promote photosynthesis in plants, we'd all be dead. As plants could never provide enough energy for us to live on.
So they're the great connectors.
They're the great connectors.
They're like Tinder.
GNC and Tinder in one podcast.
That's right. Only the best.
So what, in Chinese medicine, what's the understanding of energy?
So the traditional idea of energy is closely related with qi. Qi literally means gas, but it has energetic connotations to it, just as, in the sense of physics, gas has gas is always in a state of motion, this kind of thing. So it's often translated as energy, practically speaking. You can think of it that way, but it's important, at least in the context of medicine, I believe, to remember that the word itself is gaseous based, keeping in mind that condensed gases can have gravity and start to, have pretty miraculous effects when you look at the effect of gases in the natural world. But one of these gases is called nitric oxide. And when it's at the right amount, so too high and it shuts down mitochondrial activity, too low, it shuts down mitochondrial activity. Just like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, you've got that level that's just right. And when that happens, it signals the mitochondria to start cranking out energy. It starts converting fat into heat. It starts signaling leptin to make you, if you have extra weight, it'll cause you to start not craving food and wanting to get up and moving around. So practically speaking, it has direct effects on energy metabolism. But based on pharmacology and research on acupuncture, I wouldn't say that it's enough to say that it is energy itself. It also, some of the pathways that acupuncture works with, from a traditional standpoint, is working with qi. If we're going to call that energy, fine. One of the aspects it works with is also with ion channels and intracellularly.
Yeah, and with respect to ion channels, that's an area that Western medicine has focused a lot of attention in terms, especially with nerve activity. And by nerve activity, I include not only the brain, but the gut-brain axis. There are as many nerves in the gut as there are nerves in the brain. At any rate, the ion channels are affected by many different transmitters.
I've had a gut feeling about that for some time.
Heartburn, too.
Heartburn, too, yeah. It's interesting. We have a lot of these concepts in our language. And it's kind of, even if you look at the old Greek ideas of, humors and this kind of thing, we still have in our language that person has a lot of gall, or, it's a little antiquated now, but people might say, oh, this fat guy's a little phlegmatic. And, now we look at somebody who's has a lot of lethargy and is kind of fat, and their biofilms are high, they're snoring, and then you have someone might have a lot of gall, but then also bile flow has direct effects on gut bacteria and gases that are produced there, like hydrogen sulfide, that can influence how your memory is. So it's just fascinating. I'm always finding new connections between some of the so-called antiquated ideas from our history that were tossed aside in the medical waste bin that are almost coming full circle as we understand more about the gut-brain axis.
Yeah, the one that just came to mind for me is livid with rage.
Livid, yeah. Liver.
Liver, exactly. So what Western medicine has focused on are these ion channels. And typically what happens is that a neurotransmitter is released. And releasing that neurotransmitter from one nerve cell to a second nerve cell changes the electrical potential of the second cell and opens ion channels and allows that second cell to carry its electrical message on further down the line.
Creates kind of a chain reaction.
Exactly.
A game of telephone in third grade that hopefully works out better.
Exactly. There has been relatively less attention paid to what optimizes the neurotransmitters that are being released. Western medicine, instead of focusing on the energy changes or some of the internal changes that can take place to affect those neurotransmitters, they focus on drugs to try to increase or decrease the levels of neurotransmitters. Sometimes that's appropriate. People who have Parkinson's disease, for whatever reason they got there, their dopamine system is not functioning well. So they need to have some replacement of dopamine. But in other situations, before people get to that end stage, people don't need a heavy-handed drug that operates at one place. We need to pay more attention to the balancing of the energy systems. Some of that's happening in Western medicine now with focus on mindfulness-based meditation practices that are showing widespread positive benefits for a whole host of problems.
What's the relationship between this neurotransmission and neuroplasticity in the brain? And this, I've seen, different methods that are supposed to increase or even, decrease neuroplasticity. I've seen some research that's linked too much neuroplasticity with tinnitus. So I just wanted to see what your take was on that.
I think with anything, it's part of the middle road approach. If you are promoting too much neuroplasticity, then you're going to get into problems. However, a healthy brain releases the neurotransmitters that promote healthy connections within the brain. It's like having a healthy plant. If you give it too much fertilizer, it starts growing too much or budding too quickly. It doesn't produce the fruit that you want. Same thing with our brains.
I've seen people take a lot of, nootropics, some supplement or herb. People are always asking me, what can I do to crank up my brain? And it's very difficult to answer because if they're in a state of inflammation, many of these substances can increase it. And likewise, if they're in a state where they don't have enough inflammation in their body, something that's anti-inflammatory. See people who are cold all the time. They are taking a bunch of antioxidants. They don't have enough oxidation in the body to make these connections to be regrowing nerve tissue. They just are far away from that sweet spot. So it's very hard to give kind of unilateral answers without doing a lot of diagnosis first.
Yeah, the sweet spot is very important. Speaking of sweet spots, what happens when too many sweets get into the gut?
Well, you get a bacterial bloom. I've seen some studies as well linking different brainwave patterns with blood sugar. I think if your blood sugar spikes a lot, you get a little bit dumb. We've all experienced that. You get, it's called the itis. You eat a bunch of honeyed ribs, and then you're just kind of,
Yeah. And that's a case where there truly is a sweet spot. We do need a certain amount of carbohydrates,
right.
But
your brain is just craving those too, isn't it? Something like a third of your body's energy your brain eats up.
Yeah. But taking in too much sweets, we've gone beyond the sweet spot, and then we're in trouble.
How does that contribute to burnout? Because everybody I know, once they start down that path of, destroying themselves by overthinking and overworking, it seems like immediately the foods that they reach for become something just intensely rich in carbohydrates and fats. And I often wonder whether they're able to even digest and assimilate it because their body is already in this inflammatory state. What's your take on this?
Well, at the level of the brain, sort of ignoring the effects in the gut, but at the level of the brain, from the damage that has already occurred, the traumas that have occurred, the connections within the brain have already started to break down.
This can happen just from stress and overwork and not enough sleep. Yeah.
Right. Repetitive stress, day in, day out, little traumas add up, and the connections break down. Once the connections start breaking down, people need more raw energy. Once again, the enzymes, the connections, the enzymes are diminishing. In order to get the same effect, to try to push up over that hill, people try to replace it with raw energy.
So they have this sugar because it gives them this kind of illusion that they're going to have something that's nutrient rich, but it's instead of providing those enzymes that are so crucial, it's basically just gumming up their system.
Exactly. Yeah. And then give me another donut.
And you see that all of the energy drinks out there, they're loaded with sugar. They have maybe some amino acids, but B vitamins, that kind of thing. But really, it's not working with infrastructure. It's just supply.
Right.
Think of it like, you think of those zombie movies sometimes when all of the cars are broken down. It doesn't matter if there's a truck on the way to fill Costco. If all of the trucks are broken down, it's not a problem of supply so much as distribution. So if the roads aren't working, then it doesn't matter if, you see that in African countries. You'll have crops rotting in the field, and in other places people are starving. It's because the roads have been taken over by insurgents. So I just think of, when you're in a state of inflammation like this, the connections are breaking down. Then in one area you have weight gain. On the other you have cells that are starved for energy. It's just, we've kind of gone into this, almost dystopian internal environment.
Exactly. And it's also important to realize that the emotional centers that are keyed towards providing basic survival, those centers are disconnected from the rational centers. So even if you know that these things aren't good for you, the trauma that has isolated the emotional centers can continue to drive these very strong desires.
That's my understanding, too, that most of our feeding decisions are more emotional than logical. And the more that breakdown occurs, you can you can be stuffing your face and hating yourself and knowing that it's the worst thing in the world to do, but can't really stop. For me personally, if life has just gone to hell and I'm walking through Safeway or grocery store, I look at those cinnamon rolls, the cheap ones, and they just look like love. They do. And ordinary, if I'm exercising, if I'm happy, I walk by and go, whoa, people eat that? And then other times, I'm feeling down in the world. I'm like, oh, it's a cinnamon roll. It's love in baked form.
Yeah. And every drug addict that I know, in part, hates themselves for using drugs, desperately want to stop, and at the same time, they're chasing that high, that brief moment of euphoria that they first experienced. They want that emotion back at any cost.
That's more hardcore than cinnamon rolls.
And you can't get IV cinnamon rolls yet.
Although the underlying mechanism is the same.
Yeah.
So, from everything I've seen, from eating addictions to IV or cocaine, people are in the same thing. It's an inflammatory state. They tend to have really jacked up nitric oxide, really diminished hydrogen sulfide, which is another gas that's an endogenous antioxidant in the body. And in this inflammatory state, your logic and emotions are on two different sides of the planet.
Exactly. So what do we do for these folks?
I think we should judge them harshly and look down our noses at their weak points coming from our strengths. We should compare our strengths with their weak points in order to make ourselves feel better.
I feel better already.
Okay, as he looks at me. Do you see? I mean, that's realistically what I think all of us do at one level or another. Just speaking personally, I like to judge my strengths to other people's weaknesses. But if we're looking at connecting with people, connecting with ourselves, and really helping ourselves and helping others, actually this is the first thing that's got to go, is the judgment and judging people at their worst from our standpoint at our best, and understanding that this is a state of inflammation. The person who is not thriving under these conditions, it's like a potted plant that's too much sun and too little water. And maybe giving them a little break, giving them a little bit of shade can help them to get back into a state where they can nourish themselves.
I agree. Giving people the space to do some things that are helpful for them is really important. And oftentimes people simply can't muster the energy to do it themselves. That's a place where we can provide some practices, some treatments, some medications that can dramatically break the pattern that people are stuck in and give them the opportunity to do the things that will heal themselves. Without that initial break, most of the studies show that it's an incredible uphill battle for people.
So initially, we definitely want to create the pattern interrupt. It's like, okay, you have a potted plant in the sun. You want to take it indoors a little bit so it's in a more shaded environment. That's kind of that pattern interrupt that's just so crucial, is take away that inflammation. And then best you can do it. You can't just dump a pot of water on it. You've got to give it as much water as it can take. It's also that sweet spot of water so it can respirate and then gradually build itself up.
Yes.
A lot of the people we work with I've worked with a number of CEOs and entrepreneurs in China. The pace of life there is absolutely insane for that. They don't have the luxury of taking time off to restore themselves, because when you're meeting with this head of the government or military or whatever, you're on their schedule. And this is the same with big business anywhere. With anything important, you're dealing with lots of people. You don't always have the freedom of time. The more power you have in life, the less time you have, generally speaking. So what we've done is we've created methods out of necessity to allow people to nourish themselves on the go. And I think that's a strategy that's necessary and really practical. One aspect we were just talking about this morning is just as crazy busy as you may find yourself, taking some intention and putting it toward the space in between your breaths and letting that over time kind of radiate out into paying attention to the space in between thoughts, the space in between activities. It's a little Zen trick that I've learned from Tom, and it's something that can really help to create space and create time and create moments of nourishment even when you're on the run. So if you're in a meeting, somebody's talking at you, you already know what you're going to say. You already know what they're going to think 5-10 minutes before they've thought it. This is a perfect time to smile, nod, and secretly pay attention to the space in between breaths. It's a nice meditation you can do while interacting with people, especially if they're a little dim. You run into them. You know what they're going to say long before they say it. Take that time to restore yourself. It's not worth anything else.
Yeah, it's amazing taking just 8-10 breaths and really feeling the space in between the breaths, really noticing the space in between thoughts. You don't have to push yourself too long, because then you may feel like you failed at something when you didn't. Just 8 or 10 breaths and notice what's in there. This also happens to help to change some of the ways that our nervous system works. It starts to automatically balance the sympathetic with the parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic for fight or flight, parasympathetic for calming and relaxation.
That'll already start to gear down some of that inflammation, won't it?
Yes, it does. Helps to ease our intestines, helps to promote better digestion of our food.
That's a great point. When you're in a state of stress, good luck assimilating what you're eating. So your body may have needs for some very nutrient-dense food. And good luck getting it there, because if your body thinks that you're about to be in a fight or flight kind of situation, it's not allocating your body's reserves to your digestive organs. It's putting them in your legs, creating tension in your lower back. It's putting that energy to your hands so you can climb up a tree or punch people, so you get that tension in the shoulders. So a lot of the pain that we see, the physical pain that we treat every day, has a lot to do with the stress response that people are living with. And then when their gut isn't craving the right kinds of foods because of the stress response, and it's not digesting efficiently because of the stress response, then generally that's where I see the beginning of a downward spiral that happens. Because once you're not digesting, because you're trying to digest through stress, then you find yourself with less and less energy by the day, less and less sleep, and then that's just a recipe for a crash.
Yeah. When we crash, we begin to hate other people, hate what we're doing, judge ourselves incredibly harshly. And then what do? We look for the cinnamon roll again.
I kind of want one now. So the more we can understand about this, the more we can really optimize ourselves. I mean, there are a lot of podcasts out there on how to biohack this or that, how to push harder, how to do all of this. But we're really advocating here are realistic, time-tested, evidence-supported strategies to find that sweet spot, metabolic sweet spot, where you're able to maximize your body's energy and increase it as you go.
What do you mean time-tested? I thought I invented this.
Well, what we're finding is that everything's coming full circle. And there's something beautiful about that and something a little bit frustrating about that too, because if people have known about this for so long, why did we forget? Oh, well, personally, I keep learning the same life lessons over and over again. I guess that's part of being human. But the nice thing is it's coming full circle. It's finding really wonderful places that it's meeting, and it's creating some tremendous opportunities for integration between Chinese and Western medicine. With that in mind, just remember, find the spaces between breaths, relax as much as you can. The more you're pushing yourself, the more you have to relax and restore as you go. That alone will start to reduce some of that inflammation, and then your body has hope of digesting what you're eating and increasing your energy levels rather than decreasing it. Wishing you all the best. We love you.